The elevator climbed to the 20th floor with a mechanical hum that seemed to echo my nervous heartbeat. I adjusted my tie for what felt like the 100th time that morning, checking my reflection in the polished steel doors. 22 years old, fresh out of college, about to start my first real job at Creative Solutions Marketing. The weight of that reality pressed against my chest like a physical thing. The doors slid open to reveal everything I'd imagined a successful marketing firm would look like. Sleek glass offices lined the perimeter, while an open floor plan buzzed with activity in the center. Phones rang constantly, punctuated by bursts of laughter from various team huddles. Employees moved with purpose between workstations, carrying coffee, cups, and folders, their conversations a mixture of creative brainstorming and business strategy. "You must be David." I turned to find a man in his mid-40s approaching with an extended hand and the kind of smile that immediately put people at ease. Everything about him radiated competent leadership. From his perfectly pressed shirt to the way other employees nodded respectfully as he passed. "Yes, sir." "David Chen, thank you so much for this opportunity, Mr. Harrison." "Tom, please, we keep things pretty informal around here, despite what the corporate attire might suggest." His handshake was firm, confident, ready for the grand tour. As we walked through the office, Tom explained the company's structure with genuine enthusiasm. Creative Solutions Marketing had been building brands for 15 years, he told me, specializing in helping mid-sized businesses find their voice in increasingly crowded markets. The energy was infectious. Everywhere I looked, people were engaged, excited about their work. "That's our creative department." Tom pointed to a section where designers were gathered around large monitors, gesturing animatedly at colorful mock-ups. "And over there is our data analytics team, the secret weapon behind every successful campaign." I nodded, trying to absorb everything while fighting the nervous energy that had been building since I woke up. This wasn't just any job. This was my entry point into the adult world, my chance to prove that 4 years of marketing theory could translate into real-world success. "And this," Tom said, stopping near a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city, "is our client relations department. Arguably the most important part of our entire operation." The corner office belonged to someone with exceptional taste. The space was minimalist but warm, carefully chosen artwork adorning the walls, and a thriving garden of succulents lined up along the windowsill. Natural light flooded the room, creating an atmosphere that was both professional and somehow welcoming. Behind an elegant glass desk sat a woman who looked up from her computer screen with a smile that managed to be both professionally appropriate and genuinely warm. She was probably in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a sophisticated style that suggested effortless elegance. Her brown eyes were intelligent, alert, the kind of person who seemed to notice everything. "David, I'd like you to meet Alina Harrison, our client relations manager," Tom said with obvious respect in his voice. "She'll be your direct supervisor for the Morrison account, your first major project here." Alina stood with fluid grace, extending her hand across the desk. Her handshake was confident, her posture perfect without seeming rigid. She wore a tailored blazer over a silk blouse, the kind of outfit that looked expensive without being flashy. "Welcome to the team, David. Tom's told me great things about your academic background and your internship portfolio." "Thank you, Ms. Harrison. I'm really excited to learn from you and contribute to the team's success." "Alina, please. I'm looking forward to seeing what fresh perspectives you bring to our client relationships, Harrison." I made a mental note of the shared surname with my department head. Probably just coincidence, Harrison was common enough. There was nothing in their interaction to suggest a personal relationship beyond professional respect. Alina walked me through the basics of the Morrison account with remarkable clarity, breaking down complex client dynamics into understandable components. I found myself impressed, not just by her obvious expertise, but by the way she seemed genuinely invested in helping me understand the nuances of client relations. "Morrison Industries has been with us for 3 years, she explained, pulling up files on her computer. "They're in a transition phase, traditional manufacturing company trying to modernize their brand without losing their established customer base. It's exactly the kind of challenge that makes this work interesting." She spoke with the kind of passion that only comes from truly loving what you do. I watched as she navigated through client files, pointing out successful campaigns and explaining the strategic thinking behind each decision. "I'll have comprehensive materials ready for you by tomorrow morning," she said, making notes in what I noticed was an actual paper planner, a refreshing analog touch in the thoroughly digital office environment. "We can go over their history, current challenges, and the specific goals for this quarter." "That sounds perfect. I really appreciate you taking the time to get me up to speed." "It's what we do here," Tom interjected with obvious pride. "We believe in setting everyone up for success from day one." Later that morning, as Tom continued showing me around the office, we ended up in the break room where several employees were gathered around the coffee machine. The conversation was light and friendly: weekend plans, someone's upcoming vacation to Maine, a heated but good-natured debate about the office fantasy football league. "Hey, Tom," called Jake from the accounting department, a guy who looked to be close to my own age. "You and Elena still on for dinner at the Mitchells this Saturday?" Sarah's been asking about Elena's famous potato salad recipe. "Wouldn't miss it," Tom replied with a warm laugh. Elena's been looking forward to catching up with Sarah all week. You know how she gets when she hasn't had her monthly dose of gossip from the neighborhood association? The casual familiarity in his voice, the easy way he spoke about Elena's social plans made something click in my mind. The same last name, the comfortable interaction during our introduction, the way Tom had spoken about her with such obvious respect and affection. "Elena is your wife," I said, the realization escaping before I could stop myself. Tom's face lit up with genuine happiness. 20 years next month. Can you believe it?" I know. Working with your spouse sounds like a recipe for disaster to most people, but it works for us. She runs her department with complete autonomy, I run mine, and somehow we manage not to drive each other completely insane. I felt heat creep up my neck as the implications sank in. The attraction I'd felt during our meeting, the way I'd noticed her elegance, her intelligence, the subtle grace in her movements, suddenly seemed completely inappropriate. Lena Harrison wasn't just a colleague or supervisor. She was married to the department head who had taken a chance on a recent graduate with no real experience. "That's wonderful," I managed, hoping my voice sounded more composed than I felt. "You both seem like incredible people to work with." "Lena's one of the best in the business," Tom said with obvious pride and affection. "Clients trust her completely, and she has this gift for bringing out the best in everyone she works with. You're lucky to have her as your supervisor." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of paperwork, computer setups, and introductions to various team members. But throughout it all, I couldn't shake the awkwardness of my initial reaction to Elena. Professional boundaries had never seemed more important or more necessary to actively maintain. By Thursday evening of my first week, I was beginning to find my rhythm in the office routine. The Morrison account materials Elena had prepared were comprehensive and well organized, and our initial meetings had been productive and strictly professional. I made sure of that, perhaps overcompensating for my initial attraction by maintaining a slightly formal distance that I hoped masked my discomfort. It was nearly 7 o'clock when I found myself still at my desk, struggling with the client presentation that was due the following afternoon. The office had largely emptied out, leaving behind the peaceful quiet that descends on corporate spaces after hours.
Ow.
The cleaning crew moved silently through distant cubicles, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. "Outside still here, David?" I looked up to find Elena approaching with 2 steaming cups of coffee. She'd changed from her earlier professional blazer into a soft gray cardigan that made her look more approachable, more human somehow. The harsh fluorescent office lighting had been dimmed to a warmer setting, creating an unexpectedly intimate atmosphere. "The Morrison presentation is proving more challenging than I anticipated," I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. Lord was Gesture was thoughtful, unexpected. I keep feeling like I'm missing something essential about what they're really looking for. May I take a look? She asked, settling into the chair beside my desk, the same chair she'd used for our previous meetings. But somehow the dynamic felt completely different in the quiet, nearly empty office. As she reviewed my work, I found myself noticing details I'd missed before. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when concentrating deeply, the slight furrow that appeared in her brow as she analyzed data, the faint scent of her perfume, something subtle and sophisticated that seemed to match her personality perfectly. "You're focusing too much on what Morrison says they want," she said finally, her voice thoughtful. "But look here, their buying patterns, their customer demographics, their actual market position. What they need isn't necessarily what they're asking for." She was absolutely right, of course, as she walked me through her analysis, pointing out gaps in my approach that now seemed obvious. I was struck by her teaching style. Patient, thorough, never condescending despite my obvious inexperience. She had a gift for making complex ideas accessible without talking down to me. "You know," she said, leaning back in her chair as we finished restructuring the presentation's core message. "When I first started in client relations, I made exactly the same mistake. I thought my job was to give clients precisely what they requested, no questions asked. What changed your perspective? Time, experience, and a few spectacular failures that taught me to dig deeper into what clients actually need." She smiled at the memory, and for the first time, her professional composure seemed to soften into something more genuine. "Tom still teases me about the Brennan Industries disaster of 2018. I gave them exactly what they asked for, and it was completely wrong for their market." The mention of her husband created a brief, awkward pause, but Alina seemed to shake it off naturally, and continued, "The real skill in this business is learning to listen to what clients don't say, understanding the problems they don't even know they have yet." We worked together for another hour, refining the presentation until it felt substantially stronger and more focused. The office had grown even quieter around us, with only the distant hum of computers and the occasional sound of traffic from the street 20 floors below. "I should ask," she said as we were beginning to wrap up, her tone shifting to something more personal, "how are you settling in overall? I know the transition from college to corporate life can be more jarring than people expect. It's been good so far. It's different from what I expected, but good. Everyone here has been incredibly welcoming." "That's not really what I meant," she said, turning slightly in her chair to face me more directly. "Are you adjusting personally? It can be isolating, starting somewhere new where you don't really know anyone outside of work." Surprised me with its directness and genuine concern. In all our previous interactions, Alina had been helpful and professional, but always maintaining that careful managerial distance. This felt different, more personal, more real. "I'm still figuring that out, honestly," I admitted, surprised by my own willingness to be vulnerable. Most of my college friends scattered to different cities after graduation. I'm living alone. For the first time, starting a career I'm not entirely sure I'm cut out for. Some days I feel like I'm pretending to be an adult until I figure out how to actually be one." Lena nodded thoughtfully, her expression understanding rather than judgmental. "That feeling doesn't necessarily go away, you know? Sometimes I think we're all just figuring it out as we go along, regardless of age or experience. Even you. You seem to have everything so perfectly organized and under control." She laughed, the first genuinely unguarded laugh I'd heard from her since we'd met. "Trust me, the appearance of having it all together is mostly smoke and mirrors. I've just gotten better at hiding the uncertainty over the years." There was something in her tone that suggested layers of complexity beneath her composed exterior, stories and struggles that the professional Alina kept carefully hidden. But before I could process that fully or think of how to respond, she was standing and gathering her things. "You should be proud of the work we accomplished tonight," she said, returning to her familiar, professional demeanor. "The presentation is much stronger now. Morrison is going to be genuinely impressed. Thank you so much for staying late to help me. I really can't express how much I appreciate it. That's what good teams do. We support each other when it matters." As she headed toward the elevator, I found myself watching her go and wondering about that brief moment of vulnerability she'd shared. Alina Harrison was clearly far more complex than the composed, professional facade she maintained during regular business hours. I packed up my own things slowly, replaying our conversation and trying to understand why it had felt so significant. For the first time since starting the job, I'd felt like I was talking to someone who truly understood the uncertainty and self-doubt that came with major life transitions. The fact that this person happened to be my supervisor and my supervisor's wife complicated things in ways I wasn't quite ready to analyze. The elevator doors closed behind me, and I realized I was looking forward to tomorrow in a way that had nothing to do with the Morrison presentation and everything to do with the possibility of another genuine, unguarded conversation with Alina Harrison outside. The city was fully transitioning from day to evening, office buildings, lighting, up against the darkening sky like vertical constellations. I walked toward the subway station thinking about professional boundaries, about the difference between admiration and attraction, about the subtle complexity I'd glimpsed behind Elena's carefully maintained professional composure. What I didn't realize was that our late-night working session had established something new between us, a foundation of mutual respect and understanding that would prove both invaluable and dangerous in the weeks to come. Over the following weeks, Alina and I found ourselves working together more frequently than strictly necessary. What started as supervision on the Morrison account evolved into collaboration on multiple projects. Our morning coffee meetings, initially scheduled for 15 minutes, began stretching to 30, then 45 minutes, as our conversations naturally expanded beyond immediate work concerns. "How was your evening?" It became a regular opening, followed by genuine interest in the answer. I learned that Alina often worked late not because she had to, but because going home to an empty house felt lonelier than staying in the office. Tom's schedule had become increasingly demanding as the company pursued several major new accounts, leaving Alina to navigate most evenings alone. "We don't have children," she mentioned one Thursday morning, stirring her coffee with deliberate focus. "It just never happened." Tom threw himself into building the business, and I threw myself into my career, and somehow we never quite found the right moment. There was a wistfulness in her voice that suggested this wasn't entirely by choice, but I sensed it wasn't my place to probe deeper. Instead, I found myself sharing more of my own uncertainties, my fears about whether I was mature enough for this environment, my struggles with imposter syndrome, my attempts to figure out what kind of adult I wanted to become. "About things more deeply than most people twice your age," Alina said one morning, and I was struck by how much her opinion had come to matter to me. "There's a thoughtfulness in how you approach problems that's really refreshing." Our lunch meetings multiplied as well. What started as working lunches became genuine breaks from the office routine. Alina would suggest new restaurants, always somewhere within walking distance, and we'd find ourselves discussing everything from office politics to childhood, memories to our differing perspectives on work-life balance. 3 weeks into this routine, we found ourselves working late on the Hartwell Industries presentation, potential client worth more than any account I'd worked on before. The office had emptied completely by 8 o'clock, leaving us alone with our laptops and the city lights twinkling beyond Elena's windows. "I think we need to completely restructure this section," Alina said, rubbing her temples. "Hartwell isn't going to respond to traditional corporate messaging. They're too innovative, too forward-thinking." I watched her work, noting the way stress showed in the slight tension around her eyes, the way she unconsciously twisted her wedding ring when deep in thought. We'd been at this for 3 hours, and I could sense her frustration building. "I ask you something personal?" she said suddenly, not looking up from her laptop. "Of course, do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like you woke up one day and found yourself in circumstances you don't remember choosing?" The question hung in the air between us, more vulnerable than anything she'd shared before. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "but I think that might be normal when you're trying to figure out who you are." "I'm 38 years old," she said with a hollow laugh. "I should have figured out who I am by now." She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, and for the first time, I saw past the polished professional exterior to something raw and uncertain underneath. "My marriage isn't unhappy," she continued, as if she needed to clarify. "It's just ... distant. Tom and I are excellent business partners. We run this company well together. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being anything else." I didn't know how to respond to such honesty, so I offered my own vulnerability in return. "I spend most days feeling like everyone can see that I don't belong here," I said. "Like there's some adult handbook everyone else got that explains how to be confident and competent, and I'm just winging it and hoping no one notices." Alina turned to look at me directly. "You know what's funny? You're the first person in years who talks to me like I'm a real person, instead of just Tom's wife or the client relations manager. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" After that night, something shifted between us. Alina began asking for my opinion on things that had nothing to do with work. Should she redecorate her office? What did I think about a book she was reading? Did I have recommendations for weekend activities that might help her feel less isolated? Our text conversations, which had started as simple work coordination, began extending into evenings and weekends. Nothing inappropriate, just the kind of ongoing dialogue that develops between two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. Alina, 7:43 p.m. "Have you ever read anything by Haruki Murakami?" David, 7:45 p.m. "No, but I've been meaning to." "Why?" Alina, 7:47 p.m. "Just finished the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. Can't decide if it's brilliant or completely bizarre. Maybe both." David, 7:50 p.m. "That sounds like my kind of book. Mind if I borrow it?" Our lunch meetings became almost daily occurrences. We'd walk to different spots around the neighborhood, our conversations ranging from current events to childhood memories to philosophical discussions about purpose and fulfillment. Jake from accounting mentioned it one Friday afternoon. "You and Alina have been spending a lot of time together lately, working on something big." I felt heat creep up my neck. "Just the usual client work. She's been really helpful getting me up to speed." But his comment made me aware that others had noticed our growing closeness. I started paying attention to glances, to the way conversations would pause when Alina and I walked past together, to the subtle curiosity in colleagues' questions about our projects. The Hartwell presentation was a complete success. Alina and I had worked seamlessly together, and the client was not only impressed, but ready to move forward with a comprehensive campaign. Walking back to the office, both of us were energized by the victory. "Make a great team," Alina said. As we waited for the elevator in the client's building, "We really do. I couldn't have pulled that off without you. You're selling yourself short. Your insights about their target demographic were spot-on." Back at the office, the achievement felt even more significant. This wasn't just a successful presentation. It was validation that our collaboration produced something neither of us could have created alone. "Thank you," Alina said as we reached her office. "For everything. For making this fun again." Before I could respond, she stepped forward and hugged me. It started as the kind of celebratory embrace that might happen between any colleagues after a major success, but it lingered. Her arms stayed around me a moment longer than appropriate, and I found myself hyper-aware of her proximity, the faint scent of her perfume, the way she fit against me. When we finally stepped apart, something had changed. Elena's professional composure had slipped, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that made my heart race. "I should ... double quotes," she started, then stopped, clearly flustered. "Lena, I'll see you Monday," she said quickly, disappearing into her office and closing the door. The weekend that followed was torture. Every interaction was replayed in my mind, every text message analyzed for hidden meaning. We were crossing into territory that felt both inevitable and completely wrong. Saturday afternoon found me browsing the fiction section at Chapter and Verse, a small independent bookstore downtown. I was looking for the Murakami book Alina had mentioned when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I wouldn't have taken you for a weekend bookstore browser. I turned to find Alina holding a stack of books, dressed casually in jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger, more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. Alina, hi. I was actually looking for that book you mentioned, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. Really? Her face lit up with genuine pleasure. It's over here in the international fiction section. She led me through the narrow aisles, her enthusiasm infectious as she pulled books from shelves and explained why she loved them. For the first time since I'd known her, Alina seemed completely unguarded, animated by genuine passion rather than professional competence. Have you eaten lunch? She asked as we made our way to the checkout counter. Not yet. No. There's a cafe next door. If you'd like to continue this conversation, we spent the next 3 hours talking about books, about travel dreams, about the differences between our generations and backgrounds. Alina told me about her college years when she'd planned to become a writer, when poetry had felt like the most important thing in the world. I wrote constantly, she said, her eyes distant with memory. Terrible poetry, probably, but it felt so urgent, so necessary. I had notebooks full of half-finished poems about everything: love, loss, the way morning light looked on my dorm room wall. What happened to that? Life, marriage, career, responsibilities. She shrugged, but I could hear the regret.
Out!
Tom needed help building the business. Writing seemed like a luxury we couldn't afford. Do you ever think about starting again? Sometimes. But it's been so long. I'm not sure I'd remember how to access that part of myself. You should try, I said, surprised by my own boldness. Your insights, the way you see patterns and meaning, that's exactly what good writing requires. Alina looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You really think so? I know so. As the afternoon turned to evening, neither of us seemed eager to end the conversation. We walked slowly back toward our cars, the easy companionship of the day, gradually giving way to the awareness that Monday would return us to our professional roles. Thank you for today, Alina said as we reached her car. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation about books and dreams and all the things that used to matter to me. Thank you for sharing all of that with me. We stood there for a moment, both recognizing that something significant had shifted between us. The afternoon had revealed sides of ourselves that the office environment never allowed, and going back to purely professional interaction felt impossible. I'll see you Monday, she said finally. But her tone suggested she was already dreading the return to carefully maintained boundaries. Driving home, I realized that my feelings for Alina had evolved far beyond simple attraction or professional admiration. Somewhere between coffee conversations and collaborative presentations and Saturday afternoon book discussions. I had fallen for her, not just her elegance or intelligence, but her vulnerability, her unfulfilled dreams, her genuine desire to connect with someone who saw her as more than just a role she played. The complexity of our situation was becoming undeniable. I had no idea what to do about it. The crisis hit on a Tuesday morning like a lightning strike. I arrived at the office to find Alina already at her desk, her face pale as she stared at her computer screen. The Meridian Group, our largest client, representing nearly 30% of the company's revenue, was threatening to terminate their contract. What happened? I asked, setting down my coffee and immediately focusing on her distressed expression. Miscommunication with their marketing director. Someone, I think it was Jake from our side, sent them preliminary concepts that weren't approved for client review. The designs were completely off-brand, and now they think we don't understand their vision at all. Alina's hands were trembling slightly as she pulled up emails. I'd never seen her this shaken. The Alina I knew was unflappable, always composed, even under pressure. But this was different. This threatened everything she'd built here. They're meeting with Tom in an hour, she continued, her voice tight with stress. If we lose Meridian, there will definitely be layoffs. And as client relations manager, I'll be the first to go. That's not going to happen, I said with more confidence than I felt. We can fix this. How they've already made up their minds. They think we're incompetent. I pulled up a chair beside her desk, close enough to see the email chain that had led to this disaster. The designs that had been sent were indeed completely wrong, corporate, and sterile when Meridian prided itself on being innovative and dynamic. What if we could show them something that proves we do understand their brand? Not just concepts, but a complete campaign strategy that addresses their actual concerns. Lena looked at me skeptically. In 1 hour, we have their brief? From 6 months ago, we have all their feedback from previous campaigns. We know what works for them. I was thinking out loud now, ideas forming as I spoke. What if we create a presentation that shows we've been listening all along? For the next 55 minutes, Alina and I worked with an intensity I'd never experienced. We pulled data from every successful Meridian campaign, identified patterns in their preferences, and crafted a strategy that showcased not just our understanding of their brand, but our vision for taking it to the next level. Elena's stress gradually transformed into focused energy as we built something that felt genuinely innovative. Her expertise combined with my fresh perspective created ideas that neither of us could have developed alone. This could actually work, she said as we put the finishing touches on our impromptu presentation. It's going to work, I assured her. Tom's meeting with Meridian lasted 2 hours. Alina and I waited in her office, both too nervous to focus on anything else. When Tom finally appeared in her doorway with a broad smile, the relief was overwhelming. They loved it, he announced. Not only are they staying, but they want to expand their contract. Whatever you two put together in that hour was exactly what they needed to hear. Lena sank back in her chair, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. Thank God. You should both be proud, Tom continued. That kind of quick thinking and collaboration is exactly what makes this company special. After Tom left, Alina and I sat in her office, both processing what had just happened. We'd saved not just her job, but potentially several others. More than that, we'd proven that our partnership could handle real pressure. I couldn't have done that without you, Elena said quietly. We make a good team. We make a great team. By 7 o'clock, the office had emptied completely. Alina and I had been debriefing the day's events, analyzing what had made our solution successful, but gradually our conversation had shifted to more personal territory. David, Alina said suddenly, then stopped, as if gathering courage for what she was about to say. She stood and moved to her office door, closing it with deliberate care. When she turned back to face me, something in her expression had changed. The professional mask had completely fallen away. This stays between us, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, sensing the gravity of whatever she was about to share. I need to tell you something, and I need to know that you'll keep it completely confidential. You can trust me completely, I said, echoing the words I'd spoken weeks ago during our first late-night conversation. Alina moved back to her chair but didn't sit down. Instead, she stood with her hands clasped in front of her, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. I think about you all the time, she said, the words coming out in a rush. I wake up, looking forward to our coffee meetings. I find excuses to work on projects with you. I've started staying late, hoping you'll still be here. My heart was racing, but I stayed silent, sensing she needed to get this all out. I haven't felt this connected to another person in years. And I know how complicated that is, how impossible it makes everything. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional admiration. Alina, I'm married, she continued, as if she needed to remind herself as much as me. I made vows 20 years ago to a man who's a good person, who doesn't deserve to be hurt. But sitting here with you, talking with you, working with you, it feels more real than anything else in my life. I stood up, moving closer to her. You're not the only one feeling this way. No, she said softly. I can see it in the way. You look at me, and that terrifies me, because I don't know what to do with these feelings. Alina, you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Your intelligence, your creativity, the way you see possibilities that others miss. I've never felt this way about anyone. She closed her eyes as if my words caused physical pain. This is so complicated, I know, but that doesn't make it less real. Alina opened her eyes and looked directly at me. For a moment, we just stood there, both acknowledging what was happening between us without words. and she stepped closer, close enough that I could see the uncertainty and longing in her expression. I reached up to touch her face, and she leaned into my hand with a soft sigh. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "I know." But neither of us moved away. Instead, Alina rose up on her toes, and I leaned down to meet her. Our first kiss was tender, hesitant, as if we were both afraid that acknowledging this connection might make it disappear. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, the rest of the world fell away. There was only Alina in my arms, only the feeling of finally expressing what we'd both been holding back for weeks. When we finally separated, both of us were trembling slightly. Alina immediately stepped back, her hand going to her lips as if she couldn't believe what had just happened. "Oh God," she said, reality crashing back in. "What are we doing?" "Alina, it's okay." "No, it's not okay. I'm married. You work for my husband." This is as she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I moved toward her again, but carefully, not wanting to pressure her. "Hey, look at me." She raised her eyes to mine, and I could see the war between her feelings and her sense of responsibility. "I care about you," I said simply. "Not just this physical attraction, but everything about who you are, your mind, your dreams, the way you've started writing poetry again because someone finally encouraged you to believe in yourself, David. ... I'm not asking you to make any dramatic decisions. I'm not asking you to leave your marriage or change your life. I just want you to know that whatever you're feeling, you're not alone in it." Alina moved to her desk chair and sat down heavily, running her hands through her hair. "This has to stay private," she said finally. "Completely private." "Of course." "Mean it, David, if anyone found out, Tom, our colleagues, anyone, it would destroy everything. My career, your career, my marriage, I understand." She looked up at me, her expression both grateful and pained. "I can't leave my marriage. Not right now. Maybe not ever. Tom is a good man, and 20 years of history isn't something you just walk away from. I'm not asking you to. But I can't pretend this didn't happen either. I can't pretend I don't have feelings for you." I sat down across from her, giving her space while maintaining eye contact. "So what do we do?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never been in this situation before. We take it one day at a time," I suggested. "Honest with each other about what we're feeling, but we're careful about how we express it. Protect what we have while respecting the complexities of your situation." Alina nodded slowly. "Can you live with that kind of uncertainty? Can you live with keeping this secret? Can you?" She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "I think I have. Two, because the alternative is losing you completely, and I can't bear that thought." "Then we'll figure it out together," I said. "Whatever this becomes, we'll navigate it together." Alina smiled for the first time since our kiss, a small, vulnerable smile that made my chest ache with affection. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding. For not pressuring me to choose. Thank you for trusting me with this." As I gathered my things to leave, Alina called my name softly. "David, this doesn't change how much I value what we have. If anything, it makes it more precious." Walking to the elevator, I realized that everything had changed between us, and yet nothing had changed. We were still Alina and David, still colleagues who worked brilliantly together, still two people who found something rare and meaningful in each other's company. The only difference was that now we both knew exactly what that something was. The weeks following our confession transformed the office into a different kind of space entirely. Where once I saw conference rooms, I now saw possibilities for stolen moments. Where once I attended meetings, focused solely on business, I now found myself hyper-aware of Elena's presence across the table. The way she would catch my eye for just a second longer than necessary. The subtle smile that was meant only for me. We became experts at finding opportunities for brief privacy. Empty conference rooms during lunch hours became our sanctuary, where we could speak in hushed tones about things that had nothing to do with client presentations or quarterly reports. The supply room on the third floor, rarely visited after 4 o'clock, became a place where Alina might brush my hand while reaching for files, where I might whisper something that made her laugh softly. "You realize we're becoming criminals," Alina said one afternoon as we stood closer than colleagues. "Should in conference room be ostensibly reviewing the Patterson account, but actually just enjoying the rare moment of privacy. The most innocent criminals in history, I replied, resisting the urge to touch her face. Our text conversations evolved into a lifeline that sustained us through the careful distance we maintained during office hours. Messages that started as work coordination gradually became our way of maintaining connection throughout the day and into the evening. Alina, 11:47 p.m. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what you said earlier about taking creative risks. David, 11:49 p.m. The poetry workshop idea. Alina, 11:52 p.m., among other things. You make me feel brave. David, 11:54 p.m. You make me feel like I understand what it means to really care about someone. Alina, 11:58 p.m. We should probably get some sleep. David, 12:01 a.m. Probably. Sweet dreams. Alina, 12:03 a.m. You too. The change in Alina was remarkable and gradual. She began dressing with more color, her laughter came more easily, and there was an energy about her that colleagues couldn't help but notice. She started keeping a small journal on her desk, and I would occasionally catch her writing in it during quiet moments, her expression focused and content. You seem really happy lately, Jake mentioned to me one day in the break room. His job must be agreeing. With you, I'm learning a lot, I said carefully. Alina seems different too. More? I don't know, alive? Marriage counseling, maybe? I felt heat creep up my neck and focused intently on my coffee. I wouldn't know about that. Our careful discretion was tested repeatedly as the weeks passed. The closest call came on a Thursday afternoon when Tom decided to stop by Elena's office while she and I were reviewing what was supposedly the Morrison renewal, but was actually Alina showing me a draft of a poem she'd written the night before. The metaphor about autumn leaves is beautiful, I was saying, leaning closer to read over her shoulder. When we heard footsteps in the hallway, Alina immediately minimized the document and pulled up a client file while I stepped back to a more appropriate distance. By the time Tom appeared in the doorway, we looked like nothing more than colleagues discussing business. How's the Morrison renewal coming along? Tom asked, settling into the chair across from Elena's desk. Very well, Elena said smoothly, though I could see the slight tremor in her hands. David's insights about their evolving market position have been really valuable. Excellent. I knew you two would work well together. The irony of his statement hung in the air as he continued discussing client strategy for another 10 minutes. When he finally left, Alina and I sat in silence for a long moment. That was too close, she said quietly. Way too close. But it wasn't just Tom we had to worry about. The office gossip had begun to swirl around Elena's apparent transformation. She's like a different person. I overheard Sarah from accounting telling another colleague, 20 years I've worked here, and I've never seen Alina this ... vibrant. Something's definitely changed in her life. Maybe she and Tom are finally thinking about having kids, the other woman suggested, at 38. Possible, I guess. Or maybe she's just finally found her groove professionally. I found myself carrying the weight of guilt more heavily as these conversations multiplied. Tom had been nothing but supportive and trusting, giving me opportunities and guidance that I knew I didn't deserve, given what was happening between Alina and me. He would stop by my desk to check on my projects, offer advice about career development, even invite me to join him and Alina for lunch occasionally, invitations I had to carefully decline without seeming ungrateful. You've really blossomed. Here, Tom said to me one morning, Alina tells me your strategic thinking has matured considerably. I'm thinking about putting you on the Henley Industries pitch next month. It's incredibly generous, I said, meaning it. I really appreciate your confidence in me. The guilt was a constant companion, but Alina struggled with something even more complex. I could see it in the way she twisted her wedding ring during our private conversations, in the hesitation that sometimes crossed her face when we shared an intimate moment. I've never been dishonest with Tom, she confided one evening, as we walked to our cars after working late, 20 years of marriage, and I've never lied to him about anything significant. You having second thoughts? Every day, she admitted. But then I think about losing what we have, and I can't bear it. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. Despite the stress of secrecy, our emotional connection continued to deepen in ways that surprised both of us. Alina began sharing her poetry regularly, sending me drafts via text or slipping printed copies into files she knew I'd be reviewing. Her writing was remarkable, thoughtful, evocative, full of imagery that captured both the beauty and melancholy of our situation. One poem, about two people who find each other in the wrong season of their lives, made me understand the depth of her internal struggle in a way that conversation alone couldn't convey. "You should submit this somewhere," I told her after reading a particularly powerful piece about rediscovering creative passion. "It's been 15 years since I've shown my work to anyone besides you, and it's time." There's a literary magazine I found online, Crossroads Review. They publish exactly this kind of reflective, mature poetry. I couldn't. You could. You should. Slowly, carefully, I helped Alina rebuild her confidence in her creative abilities. We would spend lunch hours discussing craft, talking about poets whose work resonated with her, exploring the themes that kept appearing in her writing. Watching her reconnect with this essential part of herself felt like witnessing someone come back to life. "I submitted 3 poems to Crossroads," she told me one day, her voice a mixture of terror and excitement. "Alina, that's incredible. Don't get excited yet. They probably won't want them. They will." Our physical relationship remained carefully. Constrained brief touches, stolen kisses in empty conference rooms. Moments of holding hands when we were certain no one could see. But the emotional intimacy we shared felt deeper than anything either of us had experienced before. "You know, what's strange?" Alina said one evening, as we sat in her car in the parking garage, one of the few places we could talk freely. "I feel more connected to you through these conversations than I have to Tom through 20 years of marriage." "Is that what's been missing with Tom?" "We stopped really talking years ago. We discussed business, logistics, schedules. But when did we last have a conversation about dreams or fears or what we really think about anything? I can't even remember." As autumn settled over the city, both Alina and I began questioning whether our situation was sustainable or fair. "Are we being selfish?" Alina asked one day during a rare private moment in the conference room. "Keeping this secret, putting everyone in this position?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I know that what we have feels more real than anything else in my life. But I also know that secrets have a way of becoming heavier over time." Alina had been having longer conversations with Tom about their relationship, trying to understand whether the distance between them was permanent or something that could be bridged. Meanwhile, I found myself analyzing every interaction, wondering if I was naive about the complexity of adult relationships and long-term commitments. Tom asked me if I wanted to go to couples counseling. Alina told me one evening. My heart sank. "What did you say?" I said I'd think about it. And I am thinking about it. I owe him that much honesty about where we stand. "And where do you think you stand?" Alina was quiet for a long moment. "I think we're two people who built a successful business partnership but forgot how to be married somewhere along the way. The question is whether that's something that can be recovered or whether we've just been avoiding the inevitable for years." The uncertainty was exhausting for both of us. Some days the future felt full of possibility. Maybe Alina would realize that her marriage had run its course. Maybe we could find a way to be together openly. Other days the complexity felt overwhelming, and I wondered if I was being unfair to everyone involved by continuing to nurture feelings that might never lead anywhere. "I don't want to be the reason your marriage ends," I told Alina one day. "You're not," she said firmly. "My marriage was already ending before I met you. You just helped me realize it." Still, we both knew that continuing our relationship required accepting uncertainty as a permanent condition. We were choosing to value what we had in the present, while acknowledging that the future remained unclear. "Maybe that's what love really is," Alina said one evening, "choosing to care for someone even when you can't control the outcome." Winter had settled over the city by the time our relationship found its rhythm. We had learned to navigate the careful balance between professional collaboration and private connection, between the intensity of our feelings and the practical limitations of our situation. Our office interactions had become masterpieces of subtle communication. A particular way Alina would hand me files that let her fingers brush mine. The way I would position myself during meetings so I could see her without being obvious. The shared glances that conveyed entire conversations in the space of a heartbeat. Our private moments had become even more precious for their rarity. Stolen conversations in the parking garage after late nights. Text messages that sustained us through the careful distance we maintained during business hours. Occasional lunch meetings at restaurants far enough from the office that we could speak freely without worrying about colleagues overhearing. Crossroads Review accepted 2 of my poems, Alina told me one December afternoon, her face glowing with pride and disbelief. Alina, that's incredible. I knew they would. They want to feature them in their spring issue. It's my first publication in 15 years. Watching Alina rediscover her creative confidence had been one of the most rewarding aspects of our relationship. She had started attending a poetry workshop on Saturday mornings, had begun reading her work at small literary events around the city. The woman who had once told me she'd forgotten how to access her creative self was flourishing in ways that went far beyond our personal connection. As I reflect on the past 6 months, I realize that everything I thought I knew about love and relationships has been challenged and expanded. Before Alina, I had imagined that love was simple. You met someone, you fell for them, you built a life together. The complexity of our situation had taught me that real love often exists in shades of gray, that the most meaningful connections don't always fit into conventional patterns. I had learned that maturity isn't about age, but about the ability to hold complicated truths simultaneously. Alina was married to a good man who didn't deserve to be hurt, and she was also falling in love with me. I was grateful to Tom for giving me opportunities while keeping secrets from him about the most important relationship in my life. These contradictions would have overwhelmed me 6 months ago. Now they felt like simply part of the adult world. I was learning to navigate. Alina had taught me that some of the most important relationships in our lives might never be publicly acknowledged or conventionally celebrated. What we had was real and meaningful and transformative, even if it existed in the spaces between official categories. The guilt had never entirely disappeared, but it had evolved into something more complex, an awareness of the moral ambiguity. Inherent in caring deeply for someone whose life was already intertwined with others, we had chosen to value our connection while being as ethical as possible within the constraints of our situation. Alina, meanwhile, had begun to bloom in ways that extended far beyond our relationship. Her poetry was being published, her creative confidence had returned, and she had started making decisions about her life based on what fulfilled her rather than what was expected. Whether or not our relationship had a conventional future, it had already given both of us something invaluable. I've been thinking about moving out, Alina told me one evening in late January. Not because of us, but because I need to understand who I am when I'm not half of a partnership that stopped working years ago. How do you feel about that? Terrified, excited, like I'm finally growing up at 38, on a quiet Thursday. Afternoon in February, I was reviewing quarterly reports when Alina passed by my desk on her way to a client meeting. Without breaking stride, she placed a folded piece of paper next to my keyboard, a gesture that could have looked like simply dropping off a work document to anyone who might be watching. I waited until she was out of sight before unfolding the paper. It was a new poem, handwritten in her careful script. Between seasons we exist in the space between winter and spring, where snow melts in secret places and new growth pushes through. Ground that seemed too frozen to nurture anything. Some will say this timing is wrong, that gardens should wait for proper seasons. But warmth finds its way into the most unlikely soil, and what grows there is no less beautiful for being unexpected. I looked up to find Alina returning from her meeting, her eyes finding mine across the busy office. For just a moment, we looked at each other with complete understanding. Two people who had found something rare and complicated and worthwhile. She gave me the slightest nod, a gesture that could have meant anything to an observer, but conveyed everything to me. Then she continued to her office, and I returned to my quarterly reports, both of us carrying the quiet knowledge of what we shared, as I folded the poem carefully and slipped it into my wallet. I realized that some secrets are worth keeping not because they're shameful, but because they're sacred. What Alina and I had built together existed in the careful spaces between what was spoken and what was understood, between what was conventional and what was true. I had come to this job as a recent graduate hoping to learn about marketing and client relations. Instead, I had discovered something far more valuable: that love is rarely simple. The most meaningful connections often require the most careful navigation, and that sometimes the relationships that challenge us most are the ones that help us become who we're meant to be. Our story might not have a traditional ending, but it had given both of us something irreplaceable: the knowledge that we were capable of caring for someone deeply enough to accept complexity, uncertainty, and moral ambiguity as the price of connection, and in a world that often demands simple answers to complicated questions. That felt like wisdom worth protecting,